In the heart of Obesai, where the streets hum with life and tradition flows like a river through every household, a young woman sits quietly by her window. Her name is Amara. To the world outside, hers is an ordinary existence, part of a family steeped in culture, with roots deep in expectation. But inside that house, inside her mind, a storm brews silently. Amara is no ordinary woman. Born into a life shaped by duty and loss, she carries the weight of her mother's absence and the coldness of a father who sees her as little more than a reminder of his grief. For years, she's lived in the shadow of her family, an afterthought in a house that overflows with noise yet feels achingly empty. She dreams of freedom, not the kind that breaks bonds completely, but the kind that allows her to breathe, to make her own choices, to live a life that is truly her own. Yet, in her world, dreams are fragile things, easily shattered by the realities of expectation and tradition. What happens when a family's expectations clash with the quiet rebellion of a soul yearning to be free? What happens when duty demands a sacrifice too great to bear? This is Amara's story, a journey of courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of freedom in a world that seems determined to hold her back. This is the story of a life rewritten. A story that echoes across generations, a testament to the strength found in the heart of African tales. Amara was born into a world where her existence was both a blessing and a burden. Her first breath marked her mother's last, a tragedy that cast a long shadow over her life. For her father, Chibuzo, the loss was too great to bear, leaving him distant and grief-stricken. In his eyes, Amara was not just his daughter, she was a constant reminder of what had been taken from him. Inside their home, life unfolded unequally. While Chibuzo's heart was poured into his younger son, Nkem, bright, confident, and destined for success, Amara lived in the margins. Her room, tucked away from the warmth and noise of the household, became her sanctuary. She learned to stay silent, her dreams carefully folded away, far from the sharp eyes of her stepmother, Edeora. Amara's isolation was not by choice but by design. Edeora, ever keen to assert her position, mocked Amara's aspirations at every turn. "You think you'll amount to anything with these foolish ideas? Your place is here, fulfilling your duty." Even Chibuzo's words carried the weight of dismissal, a father's love filtered through obligation. "You have a duty to this family, Amara. Nothing else matters." But the life that had been scripted for Amara was about to take an unexpected turn. One evening, Chibuzo summoned her to the family sitting room, his voice heavy with finality. He spoke of an arrangement, a marriage to Kenechi Nwosu, the son of Chief Nwosu, a man who had once saved Chibuzo's business from collapse. Kenechi was a name Amara knew only through whispers. His story was one of tragedy, much like her own, a promising young man, now confined to a wheelchair after a devastating accident. This arrangement was not about love or happiness, it was about debt, duty, and the preservation of family honor. For Amara, it was a moment of reckoning, a life that already felt suffocating was about to become even smaller. And yet, deep within her, the embers of resistance began to stir. It began with a single sentence, a decision made without consultation, a declaration that would change the course of Amara's life forever. Chibuzo summoned her to the sitting room, his words heavy and final. "You will marry Kenechi Nwosu. The arrangement has been made." Amara's breath caught in her chest, her mind racing with questions. She knew the name Kenechi, though only in whispers, a man confined to a wheelchair, a recluse hidden behind the grandeur of his family's wealth. She looked at her father, searching for even a glimmer of understanding, but found none. Instead, Adeora's sharp voice cut through the air like a blade. You should be grateful. Kenechi is wealthy, and that's all that matters. But gratitude was the furthest thing from Amara's mind. She wanted freedom, a life she could call her own. Yet here she was, a pawn in a game she had no control over. Across town, in the vast halls of the Nwosu estate, another story was unfolding. Kenechi Nwosu, once a vibrant young man with dreams of becoming an architect, now spent his days confined to a wheelchair. His accident had taken more than just his ability to walk, it had stolen his confidence, his aspirations, and his connection to the outside world. The mansion was filled with expensive furniture and lifeless silence. Kenechi avoided the gaze of his father, Chief Nwosu, who spoke of the arranged marriage as if it were a solution to his son's growing isolation. For Kenechi, it felt like yet another reminder of what he had lost. Meanwhile, Amara found herself swept into the whirlwind of wedding preparations, a spectacle designed to showcase the union of two influential families rather than the lives of the two individuals involved. Her stepmother, Adeora, took control of every detail, leaving Amara as little more than an observer in her own marriage. Alone in her room, Amara clung to the small notebook she had hidden for years, a sanctuary where she wrote her dreams, fears, and hopes for a different life. But even this fragile comfort was short-lived. What is this nonsense? Dreams of writing. You're marrying into wealth, Amara. That's your future now. Her words cut deep, but not as deep as the sound of the torn pages, a symbolic end to the life Amara had once envisioned for herself. With each passing day, the weight of the impending wedding grew heavier, leaving her feeling detached, hopeless, and trapped. And then, the day arrived. The Nwosu mansion was filled with guests, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But for Amara and Kenechi, the atmosphere felt hollow. As she walked down the aisle, her steps felt heavy, each one pulling her further from the life she had dreamed of. Kenechi, seated at the front, looked up as Amara approached. His face was handsome, but his eyes mirrored the same sadness she felt, a pair of strangers, bound by duty and circumstance. Vows were exchanged without emotion, words spoken out of obligation rather than love. When the ceremony ended, the applause of the guests echoed through the hall, but to Amara and Kenechi, it sounded hollow, a celebration of a union neither had chosen. Bound by duty, two strangers found themselves tied to a life neither had asked for. For Amara, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of her dreams. For Kenechi, it was yet another chapter in a life that no longer felt like his own. In the grand halls of the Nwosu mansion, Amara's new life felt like a gilded cage. The opulence around her was suffocating, its silence magnifying her loneliness. Each day, she tried to find her place, but the vastness of the home only reminded her of how small and out of place she felt. The routines were hollow, the interactions strained. For Amara, it was a constant reminder that this was not a life she had chosen. Kenechi's presence was a shadow, quiet, withdrawn, and unapproachable. The wheelchair that confined him seemed to define his world, and he had little interest in letting anyone, including Amara, into it. He avoided her, spending hours behind the closed doors of his study, buried in silence. Then one day, as she tried to busy herself by tidying his study, Amara noticed a stack of unopened letters on his desk. They were from a rehabilitation center, letters detailing potential treatments, progress reports, and encouragement to take the next steps in his recovery. Each envelope, untouched and forgotten, told a story of opportunities ignored and hope abandoned. She held one for a moment, her heart heavy with questions, before setting it back down. In that moment, she realized that the distance between them was more than just physical, it was a wall built on pain and resignation. Amara knew she couldn't remain a passive observer in her own life. That evening, she approached him, her resolve firm but her steps hesitant. She knocked on the door to his study and, when he allowed her in, she stood before him, searching for the right words. Her words were simple yet transformative. "You don't have to pretend with me. Let's face this together." She wasn't offering pity, she was offering partnership. Kenechi, guarded and skeptical, dismissed her at first. Years of shielding himself from vulnerability had made him resistant to help, even from someone who shared his home. But there was something in her voice, a quiet determination, that he couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, something began to shift. Kenechi, reluctant but curious, allowed her into his world. Together, they attended therapy sessions, and though progress was slow, each step forward felt like a small victory. Amara celebrated his achievements, no matter how modest, and with her unwavering support, Kenechi started to see himself not as a victim of his circumstances, but as someone capable of reclaiming his life. In their quiet moments, they began to share pieces of themselves. Amara spoke of her dreams of becoming a writer, her struggles growing up in a home where she felt invisible, and her battles with her father's expectations. Kenechi, in turn, shared stories of the life he had envisioned before the accident, his passion for architecture, his ambitions, and the pain of watching those dreams slip away. These moments, though small, began to form the foundation of something deeper, something neither of them had expected. But while their bond grew, the weight of Amara's past loomed large. Her father, Chibuzo, began calling frequently, his questions laced with impatience and judgment. Each conversation felt like a talk back to the life she was trying to leave behind. He demanded updates, pressing her to ensure the marriage fulfilled its purpose. To him, this was not a union of individuals, but a transaction, one that required results. Amara, however, had begun to find her voice. For the first time, she refused to yield to her father's demands. Her response was clear and resolute: "This is my life. I won't leave it for you." It was a declaration that shook the very foundation of their relationship. For Chibuzo, it was incomprehensible. For Amara, it was a moment of liberation, a step toward reclaiming the autonomy she had long been denied. With each passing day, Amara and Kenechi grew not only as individuals but as partners. Their shared struggles began to knit their lives together in ways they hadn't anticipated. In the quiet corners of the Nwosu mansion, something remarkable was taking root, a bond forged not by obligation, but by mutual respect, understanding, and an unspoken promise to face the future together. For Amara and Kenechi, the days that followed were marked by progress, small, steady, and significant. Together, they created a routine that brought structure to their lives. Therapy sessions became a cornerstone of their days, not just for Kenechi's physical recovery, but for both of them to heal the emotional wounds they carried. Each visit to the rehabilitation center was a mixture of challenges and triumphs, but they faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each step. Amara found joy in the quiet victories. A smile from Kenechi after a successful session, his willingness to engage in conversations about his future, and the shared laughter that now echoed through the once silent mansion. These moments reminded her of what they were building, a life not defined by obligation, but by choice. However, the shadow of Amara's past was never far away. Chibuzo's calls became more frequent, his tone sharper with each conversation. He demanded updates, questioning her commitment to the family and the marriage. For him, the union was a means to an end, a way to secure alliances and preserve their reputation. But Amara was no longer the quiet, obedient daughter Chibuzo expected. With each call, she stood her ground, refusing to let her father's expectations dictate her life. Her responses were firm, unwavering. "This is my life, Papa. I will live it on my terms." These moments were not without their cost, but for Amara, they marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where she began to truly reclaim her independence. In the midst of this, a new idea began to take shape. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace overlooking the garden, Kenechi spoke hesitantly about the possibility of starting over in a new city. For him, it was a way to break free from the constraints of the past, a chance to redefine their lives on their own terms. At first, the idea terrified Amara. The thought of leaving behind everything she had known, even the fractured relationship with her father, felt overwhelming. But the more they talked, the more the idea grew into a glimmer of hope. It wasn't about running away, it was about moving forward. Together, they began to plan. They searched for a place that felt like home, one where they could build a future free from judgment and expectation. After weeks of searching, they found it, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, far from the echoes of their past. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Moving day was filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. As they unpacked boxes and explored their new space, they felt a sense of possibility that had long eluded them. For the first time, they could imagine a future shaped by their own choices. But the past is rarely left behind so easily. One afternoon, as they settled into their new routine, the doorbell rang. Amara's heart sank as she opened the door to find Chibuzo standing there, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp and accusatory. "You think you can just walk away from your family? From your duty?" Amara stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. "This is my life, Papa," she said. "You don't control it anymore." For the first time, Chibuzo seemed to falter, his anger giving way to something resembling confusion. He looked at his daughter, no longer a girl bound by his expectations, but a woman who had found her voice. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Amara standing in the doorway, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and liberation. In the weeks that followed, Amara and Kenechi continued to build their life together. They filled their days with small joys, exploring their new neighborhood, discovering local shops, and making their house feel like home. Each step was a testament to their resilience and the strength they found in one another. Together, they began to write a new chapter, one not dictated by the expectations of others, but by the dreams and choices they had fought so hard to claim. Amara and Kenechi's journey was never about perfection or ease. It was about courage, the courage to face their pain, to challenge expectations, and to rewrite the paths that others had laid out for them. Together, they found strength in each other and discovered that love, when built on trust and resilience, can become a foundation for transformation. Their story is not just a tale of love but a testament to the power of choice, the strength of the human spirit, and the ability to reclaim one's destiny, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, let me ask you, what would you do to reclaim your life? How far would you go to break free from the chains of expectation? Amara and Kenechi's story reminds us that the journey to freedom is never easy, but it is always worth it. If this story moved you, we invite you to join us on more journeys like this. Like, comment, and subscribe to explore inspiring tales from the heart of Africa, stories of resilience, courage, and the rich tapestry of human experience. Check out our channel Echoes African Tales for more stories that will touch your heart and spark your imagination.